Hello and welcome to this lecture of Culture and Literature Aspects of the United Kingdom, created for the School of Education Department of the Rotterdam University of Applied Sciences. My name is Esther Vermaas. Today's lecture is about government and law. We will be discussing how the UK government is set up and will go into detail about the various bits and pieces that make the UK run the way it does. While we can no longer count us lucky enough to have Lizzie II among us, the principle remains the same. You can pause this video and scan the QR code or look up the link to Who's in Charge of Britain in the video description. After this video, we'll go into more detail concerning the various branches of the UK government. These are the key terms for this chapter. Pause if you need to look at them more carefully. We'll start with Parliament and government. As you may well know, the UK is run from the Palace of Westminster. It serves as the meeting point of the House of Commons and the House of Lords, known as the Houses of Parliament. Its name is derived from the neighbouring Westminster Abbey, and what you see here is actually called the New Palace. The old palace, that had been built in the same place in the 11th century, was destroyed by, well, you guessed it, a fire in 1834. The only remaining medieval structures are the Westminster Hall, the cloisters of St. Stephen's, and the chapel of St. Mary Undercroft, and of course the Jewel Tower. From left to right, you can see three images. The King cipher, the official logo of King Charles that will appear on letterboxes and official pronouncements, the logo of the UK Parliament, the Parliament portcullis, and a barrister's wig, representing the judiciary branch of the UK. While we often refer to the monarch as the boss of the UK, it is actually an institution called the Crown who is technically the boss of the country. While yes, the Crown has very little actual power nowadays, due to the UK being a constitutional monarchy, it is still a respected institution in the UK. This picture was taken when Queen Elizabeth II was still alive but too frail to attend the state opening of Parliament. Prince Charles read the Queen's speech in her place, but her seat was occupied by the state crown to symbolize that the power resided in the crown itself and not Prince Charles. As mentioned on the previous slide, the monarchy is largely a symbolic institution, and the monarch and their family can often be seen carrying out public services, such as wreath laying at commemorative services or opening new buildings. And they are connected to various official institutions in use today. For example, Royal Mail, Royal Navy, Royal Air Force, and the Crown Court. Images on the left of Lizzie II's portrait show the Crown in various ways. The Crown Court, where the Crown prosecutes in criminal cases. The Great Seal of the Realm, which appears on all official documents, with its mottos Dieu est mon droit, God and my right, and Honi soit qui mal y pense, shame on anyone who thinks evil of it. The royal cipher of King Charles III, the CR3, stands for Carolus Tertius Rex, meaning King Charles III in Latin. As stated before, the crown is often present during a great many ceremonies all over the British Isles and the former empire. For example, on the right of Elizabeth's picture, you see King Charles, who leads Remembrance Sunday commemorations in November of 2022. And in the middle, you see Charles standing vigil with his siblings at the lying-in state of Queen Elizabeth. In the middle, you see two logos of London's Underground lines, the Victoria Line and the Jubilee Line. This latter was opened in 1977 and named for Queen Elizabeth II's Silver Jubilee that year. The Prime Minister and their cabinet ruled the UK in the King's stead. The first PM was Robert Walpole, who was in office from 1721 to 1742, and the current PM is Rishi Sunak. The PM's official residence is at number 10 Downing Street, and during important meetings the PM is often seen entering the residence with various heads of state or other influential guests. Whenever journalists refer to the PM and their cabinet, they do tend to say number 10 says that. Also seen in this picture is Larry the Cat. Since 2011, he has been the current Chief Mouser to the Cabinet Office, an office unofficially dating back to the 16th century. Interestingly enough, the word Mouser comes from Middle English word mauser, meaning a hunter of mice. The person at the top of a department is called the Secretary of State, for example for defense or education, and they are assisted by more junior people called ministers. All Secretaries of State are appointed by the Prime Minister at the start of their elected rise to power. These terms are therefore the opposite of what we see in Dutch, where minister is the chief and staatssecretaris works below them. Not all heads of departments have the word secretary in their title. The head of the financial ministry is called the Chancellor of the Exchequer. This person is responsible for taxation and spending policies and lives next to the Prime Minister at number 11 Downing Street. The politicians of number 10 are supported by a large bureaucratic apparatus known as Whitehall. The people who work here, about 500,000 of them in the UK in total, are described as politically neutral appointed officials. Many of the government buildings where bureaucrats help enact government policies are located in a central part of London called Whitehall. The street is recognized as the center of government for the United Kingdom and is lined with numerous departments and ministries, including the Ministry of Defence, Horse Guards, and the Cabinet Office. Consequently, the name Whitehall is used as a metonym for British civil service and government, and as the geographic name for the surrounding area. The UK operates according to a principle called a parliamentarian sovereignty. This means that the Parliament is the highest legislative institution in the country. Thanks to the Civil War in the 1640s and the Glorious Revolution of 1688, Parliament is more powerful than the reigning monarch. Every Parliament of its time is supreme, meaning that a current Parliament can change a law made by Parliament in the 1950s, and a Parliament in the 2050s could change a law made by the current Parliament. The UK is divided into constituents, and every general election, UK citizens elect an MP, Member of Parliament, for their constituency. The members of all these constituents together form the House of Commons and decide on laws and policies through debates. The House of Lords is an unelected body of people who are nominated experts in their respective fields. While much less powerful nowadays, the monarch still needs to sign off on any bills that pass the House of Commons and the peers of the House of Lords in order for them to become laws. We will now be looking more closely at the legislative branch. This is what a full House of Commons looks like. Most of these people may be called MPs, Members of Parliament, and we'll highlight a few important roles in the House of Commons. The first is the Speaker of the House of Commons, also known as the Speaker. The role of the Speaker of the House of Commons is as old as the House itself. The Speaker leads the House's debates and they determine who may speak and for how long. They are also responsible for maintaining order during debates and in the House in general. They also punish MPs who step out of line. While the Speaker is an MP, they are not allowed to vote or take part in debates, because they are expected to be strictly nonpartisan, meaning that as soon as they become Speaker, they no longer belong to any party. For more information on the Speaker, there is a link in the description below. A second important role is the government and the Prime Minister. This is the spot where the government sits, together with the MP slap bang in the middle of the lot. These are members of Parliament who are assigned the highest offices by and from the party that has won the elections. Third, you've got the backbenchers. These are called the backbenchers because they sit on the back benches rather than the more important front benches. The British ability for naming things and people is absolutely stunning sometimes. These MPs are basically the rank and file of the winning party. They get the vote, in line with the party's wishes, obviously, speak in debates, and occupy low political offices. Finally, you've got His Majesty's Loyal Opposition, also known as the Shadow Cabinet. These frontbenchers are basically the opposite of the government. There is a shadow version of every member of government, and they scrutinize and they hold the ruling government accountable for their actions, responses, and policies. Next in the legislative branch is the House of Lords, or in full, the Right Honourable the Lords Spiritual and Temporal of the United Kingdom of Great Britain and Northern Ireland in Parliament assembled. You can become a member by appointment by the PM, for example, which isn't unheard of, official function, for example, Lord Spiritual, or by inheriting the title from a family member. Currently, there are 778 sitting members in the House of Lords, but this number isn't fixed and is prone to change. The peers in the House of Lords cannot veto bills and thus prevent them from becoming laws, but they can send bills back to the House of Commons and force Commons to reconsider parts or aspects of the bills. Sitting peers are oftentimes experts in their respective fields and will review and amend bills before they are sent back to the Commons, not unlike our Eerste Kamer. For more information, there is a link below on how to become a Lord. The Lord Spiritual are part of the House of Lords by virtue of being a senior member of a church. In the olden days, there were archbishops, bishops, and abbots present, but now only archbishops and bishops of the Church of England may attend. Under the Lord Spiritual Women's Act of 2015, whenever there was a vacancy among the Lord Spiritual during the 10 years following the Act coming into force, the vacancy had to be filled by a woman, if one is eligible. The Act does not apply to the sees of Canterbury, York, London, Durham, and Winchester, the holders of which automatically have a seat in the House of Lords. 5 women have consecutively become Lord Spiritual as a result. Nowadays, other faiths like Catholics, Jews, and Muslims are also represented as part of the Lord Spiritual. The Lords Temporal are the rest of the Lords present in the House of Lords. This group can be split into 2. The first is hereditary peers. While the House of Lords used to contain several hundred hereditary peers, this is now limited to only 92. These men and women are peers of various ranks, like dukes, marquises, earls, viscounts, and barons. Whenever a spot for a hereditary peer opens up, the other peers in the House of Lords elect a new one to take their place. The second group are life peers. This is the largest group of the 2. The life peers are people who have been given the rank of baron or baroness during their lifetime, and this title does not pass on to their children after death. Currently, there are 682 life peers who are allowed to vote in the House of Lords. The UK uses the first-past-the-post voting system to vote MPs into the House of Commons. This means that the person with the most votes in a constituency wins the whole lot. So say, for example, within an election, there are 30% Conservative and 29% Labour votes, 21 Greens, 10 Liberal, and let's say 10% local parties. That would mean that the Conservatives would win the entire constituency, even though they only got 30% of that constituency votes. Whereas in the Netherlands, they would have to create a coalition with another party to create a majority to rule. There are a total of 650 seats across the UK, and each seat represents a constituency of 70,000 people eligible to vote. You can learn more about a voting system by pausing this video and scanning the QR codes. The code in the top right describes the voting system and mentions constituencies, safe seats, marginal seats, and the number of people whose votes are lost as they don't vote for a winning candidate. The code in the bottom right explains the difference between first-past-the-post versus proportional representation voting. The other countries within the UK were bothered by the fact that it seemed that all the decisions were made in England. Every time there was to be a vote or a debate, the elected officials from Scotland, Wales, and Northern Ireland would have to travel all the way to London to be able to attend. This gave the other countries a sense of inequality compared to the English MPs, and you can imagine that this did not go over well. Besides that, what may be good for the Scots may not be good for the English, and vice versa. So it was decided that the other countries were to have more autonomy and get their own Houses of Parliament. The Scots got their Scottish Parliament in Edinburgh, the Welsh got the Senath, Welsh Assembly, in Cardiff, and Northern Ireland got the Northern Ireland Assembly in Belfast. This allowed the countries to vote for local matters more easily and gave them more autonomy in the larger kingdom. Contrary to what this book may seem to promise, the UK Constitution is not a single written document. The unwritten Constitution of the UK consists of many different points that determine how the country should be run. These include legal precedents, laws, some going as far back as Magna Carta and the Bill of Rights, and institutions such as the Crown or the Office of Prime Minister. International treaties, such as the 1707 Act of Union between Scotland and England, also govern how matters should be addressed. There is no constitutional court as such, unlike the Hoge Raad in the Netherlands, for example. Britain is therefore governed rather organically. Decisions on how the country should be run are made for a variety of reasons and based on various precedents. The UK follows what is called a common law system. That means that apart from laws that can be followed, the courts also make use of other features. The most distinctive of these features is precedent, meaning doing something because it has been done before. This basically means that judges can make judgments on decisions made by other judges during similar cases. This means that judges can be more flexible in their judgments and do not have to wait for specific laws or customs to change before they can make certain judgments. The UK court system is divided into different courts. First you have the Magistrates' Court. This is the lowest level of courts. They do not have juries but only magistrates. These magistrates, aka justices of the peace, don't have to be lawyers and don't need to be legally trained, but they may be people of good character taken from local communities. These justices are, however, supported by qualified legal advisors. Only minor cases like traffic accidents are heard here. Then you have the Crown Court. The Crown Court hears more serious cases and usually has a jury. There are 92 Crown Courts in the UK, and if someone doesn't agree with the Crown Court's verdict, they may appeal to the Court of Appeals. The Supreme Court of the United Kingdom is the highest court in the country. They do not rule whether a case is constitutional, as there is technically no constitution. They only rule whether a case is legal. Here we have a few examples of odd British laws that are still in effect today. It is unlikely these are often enforced, but the fact that they are still a thing shows that the Brits have a hard time letting go of things. Drunk in a pub. If you can't hold your liquor in a pub or any other licensed premises, you could be fined a whopping £200. Knock a door and run. It is a crime to willfully and wantonly disturb any inhabitants by pulling or ringing any doorbell or knocking at any door without lawful excuse. And finally, in 2015, a man was fined £160 because he had stayed an extra 20 minutes after his wife's service because he had prevented gravediggers from doing their job. They wanted to bury his wife and they couldn't because he was still mourning. There are two different types of law graduates in the UK: barristers and solicitors. A barrister can represent his or her client in the courtroom with a license from the Bar Council. A solicitor normally proofreads documents, meets clients, drafts case notes, and these types of things. Basically, a solicitor gets the case when a client walks in the door and hands it off when it goes to the court stage. So a majority of work are done by a solicitor. The image at the top right shows a courtroom at the Old Bailey with a judge presiding on a jury. We have reached the end of our lecture. Thank you for listening. In the description below, you will find several links to video clips that may help you get a better understanding of law and government within the UK.